Hey folks, if you're watching this for the first time, this video is just to supplement the instructions and patterns that I sell on Etsy. I'm showing off how to do the construction and a few tips here and there for the patterns that I'm releasing in 2023. If you're here because you just want to see how I do things or you have questions about cosplay in general, feel free to watch, but just so you know, that's what it's for. So first up, let's start with the swords. I'm releasing technically two patterns that are for Demon Slayer swords. One is for the Hashira Kyodro Rengoku, his flame sword, and another one that I don't have up here right now is for Tengen Uzui. These swords are actually really easy to make, and if you follow the instructions, you shouldn't have too many questions. Most cosplay foam swords are all going to be the same. They're going to be 3 layers with some kind of guard or hilt on there. So the first thing you want to do when you get the pattern is print out the page with the scale check. All of my patterns have this little scale check on them, which is this little 1 by 1 inch box or 2.54 centimeters. Print out just this page first at 100% scale. Take your ruler or measuring device. Make sure that that little box is exactly 1 inch by 1 inch. If you've done that and everything lines up, it means that the pattern is perfectly at scale. Go ahead and print the rest of the pattern. That's how you know that regardless of your printer or your printing software, that everything is gonna be the right size and come out as intended. So after you printed that out, go ahead and tape it together and then cut it out. You should have something like this. This is a pattern that I had for my Inosuke swords, which I currently don't have a pattern for, but I might make one if people want it. You'll have something like this. So get your foam, right? I recommend 3mm or 4mm. The thicker you go, the more like comic-y the sword will be. This is made from 3 layers of 3mm, right? And it's pretty good. The challenge you run into with cosplay swords is how wobbly they're gonna be. That also has to deal with the core, but in general, I think 3mm is great for foam for the swords. So cut out 3 pieces with this as the pattern, 1, 2, 3. The next thing that you're going to do is out of your middle piece, you're going to cut a section, and this is in the instructions, of course, but you're going to cut a section out of the middle piece of foam. So it's it has a little bit of a hollow piece in there. That's where you're going to place your steel rod cores. That's what gives it the stability. Even though it wobbles a little bit, it's still very sturdy, and that's what gives it the stability. Do not use wood, because you close it up, even though it's lighter, you close it up, your sword looks great. The first time it hits, something, the wood's gonna break and there's no way to fix it. You have to cut your sword open and it'll look like a horrible nightmare later on trying to put it back together. So don't use wood, it breaks, it's not great. You can use other stuff if you want. If you have, a long, flat, thick piece of plastic, that works too, but I recommend using very thin steel cores like they use for welding. I use 2 of them. Inside the sword, there's 2 of them cut and bent sort of along the shape of the sword. So you're gonna use contact cement for all of this. So you have your first piece, you lay your second piece in that has the section cut out, you put the 2 steel cores inside, glue those down, right? Wait till everything's dry. Then take your last piece, glue both sides, put it on top, seal it together, and you have the base of your blade done. It'll be square everywhere, but that's okay. The next thing you want to do is make the guard or the hilt. Instruction for the blade of the sword. Go ahead and you can either cut out 3 pieces of the hilt or the guard from the 3mm, or you can just cut out 1 piece from 10mm foam. I like that option because it'll make sure that the smoothing effort that you have to do on the guard later is minimalized. You can't really see it on here, but we used 3 layers of 3mm for the guard. And there's certain areas where it may not be as clean because you can see the layers instead of just being 1 piece. Although down here it's pretty good. So once you have the blade glued together and the hilt or the guard is glued together or finished as well, you can decide on your steps of painting. What I like to do is I will paint the sword first, leaving this space right here untouched by glue or by finisher, right? Because when you use contact cement to put things together, you want it to be foam to foam. You don't want it to be foam onto paint or foam onto a finish layer because it just won't stick. You have to do foam to foam. So it's up to you how you want to paint, but For these swords, we put them all together, minus the grip material, and then we painted them. So that's the order of operations that I like, mainly because with contact cement, you have to use it foam to foam or it just won't be as good. It'll come apart, you'll see, or hopefully not. So after you have everything glued together and painted, it's up to you how you want to finish the handle. You can use any type of material that you want. We just use this nylon webbing sort of material, but that's basically how you make the swords. The swords are easy. Like I said, any cosplay sword, whether it's from Demon Slayer or any other type of universe or fandom, they're probably going to be built the same way. I bet if you go and look at other tutorials, they're probably going to recommend the same thing, unless the sword is really unique or really different. It's going to be built out of 3 layers, put together with some type of metal core in the middle. And these are considered con safe, which is of course a good question, because that's the question that we had when we went. Cons do not use, to my knowledge anyway, do not use metal detectors. None of the ones that we've ever been to have had metal detectors. They usually just ask you to come over to the table, they touch it and they're like, okay, it's obviously foam, it's not made of hard materials on the outside. They're okay with it. And they just put a little sticker on it. So there you go, that's the swords. So the next pattern that I want to go over is the ink tank from Splatoon. This is specifically the version from Splatoon 3. It's technically a hydration pouch because it's not like a canister like in the previous games. But this is the bag, the pattern that we are going to be going over. It has one pocket here, which is transparent, so you can show off what you put in it. And then it has a hidden pocket with Velcro in the back, so you can hide your wallet or whatever. This is primarily supposed to be like a very good con backpack that goes with a costume. So that's how I designed it, and I'm very happy with it. So let's go over that, and then we will talk about the harness, which is how it attaches. So again, with any pattern, print out the scale check piece and make sure that it's going to work with your printer. Make sure that it's exactly 1 inch by 1 inch like it's supposed to be. After you've done that and you print out the rest of the pattern, what we're gonna do is, I'm just gonna call this the pouch template. We're gonna cut out 2 of these out of whatever fabric you want. I used black nylon ripstop material. So the bag is very thin, very light, but it's very durable too. So cut out 2 of those, right, out of your main pouch fabric. And then we will cut out the middle section, which you'll see on the pattern. We're gonna call this the frame. Cut out your frame, again, from whatever your primary pouch fabric is. In my case, it's this black ripstop. So you'll have 3 pieces. Then out of a vinyl fabric, which is what they call it, but it's like plastic sheeting. It's like flexible plastic sheeting. Out of the vinyl fabric, go ahead and cut 1 more pouch, basically. Pouch template complete like this out of there. One more thing to mention before we continue forward. This pattern uses trim in order to make this easier, and also because it's very difficult to hem plastic, which ends up being part of this pattern. So in order to make my life easier, and just because I think it looks nice, this pattern uses trim, as you can see. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the first things that you can do is cut out your pieces of trim or bias tape, which is what we use for the meter levels on the glass. And using the pattern, of course, make your cuts, line it up, and stitch those on. I used a single straight stitch in order to attach these. You can see I used red here and black for the rest of them. My recommended width is 3/8 inch for the bias tape that you're going to use. So go ahead and do that on the plastic sheet. You should wind up with a plastic sheet with the bias tape sewn on at the different meter levels. The next thing that you want to do is line the inside of the frame with your bias tape or trim. Go ahead and line that up, pin that down, and stitch that on. So one of the tricky things about this pattern is that the top ends up being left open, not just in one place, but in 2 places. So we have to do things in a very specific order. So the next thing that we want to do is we take our frame piece and we take our clear plastic layer, right? and we're going to put those together. Now you can go ahead and stitch your plastic layer with your meter levels and your frame together. After you do that, we're going to add a little bit of the bias tape just from here all the way across the top to here, right? We want to leave it open in the finished product. And so we're just gonna have this finished edge with the bias tape up top, but we're not gonna run it all the way down the side yet. So next step is with your other two pieces of primary pouch that you cut out from the template, right? There should be a middle piece and a back piece. What we're gonna do with those is add trim along the top edge as well. So we're gonna finish those off so that they're nice and clean. Same way we did with the front. We're just going to add it from about here, go over the top and down to the side about here and stop. So after you're done with that, you should have 3 layers with a finished top on it. You should have the bias tape on the front, the middle, and the back piece. Let's transition over to the cap really quick before we move on and start sewing more things together. So I got a red ripstop and cut the little cap out of that. It's up to you how you want to do this. If you want to use red, you want to use black, you don't want to use it. Additionally, I put a small piece of 3mm EVA foam inside, right? I just cut it out of this, made it a little bit smaller so that it fit inside the cap, stuck it inside. And then what I did is used a piece of red bias tape to finish and close the bottom, right? Held that in place, pinned it to the front of the bag, and then sewed it down. So that ends up going like that. The foam helps it stay in place and it keeps it upright, right? So it gives the appearance of that ink tank, that hydration pouch. So your whole front piece, which is the plastic and the frame and the cap, should be completely done. With the middle and the back piece, what we're going to do now is sew Velcro on. I chose to use Velcro to keep this closed. However you want to fasten it or close it is up to you. But you basically just line up Velcro on the back and middle piece facing each other, right? Because there's still 2 different pieces. There's still 2 separate pouch templates at this point. They just have their top edge finished. Line that up, go ahead and sew the Velcro on, and then, when you lay the pieces together, it should line up and it'll close. At this point, I will mention that this pattern technically does come with a bottom that you can use to make the bottom more 3D, more open, so it actually looks like a hydration pouch. I'm not gonna lie, I took the easy way and just said, forget it. I got tired of pinning and messing with the plastic. The plastic does complicate things and it makes it more difficult. I was trying to put things in my machine, and after about 10 minutes of pins slipping this way and that, I just said, forget it. So that's up to you. If you want to do it, you can use it. Otherwise, you can just make it flat like I did. It still works the way it's supposed to. Moving on, we're almost there. So I want to talk about how we're going to attach it, whether you're going to make a harness for yourself, which sort of represents what they use in the video game if you're trying to be accurate, or if you're going to make some other kind of attachment mechanism, right? Whether you want to just put like a ring in here or something, or you're going to wear it on a belt, I don't know, whatever you think. What I chose to do is put two little flaps in here made of nylon webbing that are just sewn sturdily onto the back. And this is going to allow us to attach it to the harness so that when you're wearing it, it's straight up. Now, if we look at how they do it in the game, technically, it's like this, and it's done through a hole with a carabiner. One reason, in this case, not to be completely game or lore accurate, is this is not a good way to wear a bag, and it doesn't work out very well. Also, if you only have one attachment point, it's gonna swing a lot, so I'll leave that up to you. That's not how I did it. So on your very back piece, right, that should only have trim and Velcro, go ahead and, if you wanna follow mine, add these 2 little nylon loops, equally spaced, and sew that onto your very back piece. After that, all of your pieces should be complete. They're just not put together yet. And so this is the final part. This is pretty easy. Go ahead and lay them all on top of each other. And then where the trim ends up here, we're gonna use that bias tape again collect all 3 layers so that it overlaps and it's clean, run it down the edges all the way back up here, and sew it together. And after you do that, your bag should look like this, minus the paint color. If you want to add paint, this is also what's cool about the transparent part. If you want to add paint, I just went and got a piece of construction paper that matches the ink color that I'm going to be using for the convention. I just cut it to size, and then you can stick it in there, right? This is also handy because if you make multiple Splatoon headpieces of different color, you can easily just swap out your ink color, and it's accurate and it's pretty fun. So that way you can also control the level of the ink that you have in your tank if you want to. But there you go. Let's talk about the harness. This is totally optional again, but this is how I'm going to be wearing the ink tank. So the first thing is you have your back brace pattern. This should fit everybody. It's not super huge, so even a smaller child, it should be okay still. But go ahead and cut out one of those. Now here's the thing, you can technically make this out of fabric if you want to. It's not a big deal. You can make it out of 2 pieces of fabric. I would recommend something like a canvas or a heavy duty fabric. You can make it out of fabric if you want to. I made it out of a piece of 6mm EVA foam. Now this is very dense EVA foam, so I'm going to show you something really quick. If you buy EVA foam from the craft store, it might not be good enough. This has a little bit of extra weight on it, but in general, the really good EVA foam can actually like hold weight. So this is a standard pair of scissors and it's not bending. I have some other EVA foam from the craft store, right? Same thickness, but if you did this, it just whoop, falls off because it's not hard enough. You're gonna have a little bit of weight on this because it's a brace, it's a harness, right? So you want it to be the correct foam. So either make it out of 6mm something, some heavy duty, high density EVA foam, or just cut it out of some heavy fabric, and then instead of using tri-glide slides, which is what I use here, you're just gonna stitch it directly and you'll figure out the strap length that's gonna work for you. So I'll just put it on really quick so I can show you. Right, it also has buckles on here so that it's easier to get on and remove depending on your costume. I used 1 inch of nylon webbing, just black nylon webbing, and you can wear it, you know, lower or higher up, whatever you want to do. But I used 1 inch black nylon webbing. You will need probably, I'm not like a huge guy, but you'll probably need about 3 yards for an adult and probably less for a child. The first thing is, you see the pattern has these little slices, these little black lines on there. That's where you're going to, if you're making it from foam, make your incisions just with an X-Acto knife. So you cut here, measure a length of webbing that will go through here, and then I just use a tri-glide slide to keep it in place. This whole thing is technically no sew. So this part does not require a sewing machine, which is great. You can make this just offhand. If you make the brace though out of fabric, you will obviously need a sewing machine. So I have 7 slides in total, 3 for each arm, 1 for the back, and then I am only using 2 parachute buckles. And this again is sort of optional, but it's really just so that you have a quick release to take your harness on and off. So there you go. And again, this back part right here, the reason that this is here, this little piece of fabric, is because you undo this part, right? Slide your webbing through your 2 holes, not the holes, the little flaps that you made in your ink tank, and then pull it through the slide again, and it will be attached. It'll just look like that. So that's how you do it. That's how I made the harness. I think the harness is pretty accurate to what they wear in Splatoon 3. So You can make any modifications you want, but the pattern for this and the bag come together, and you're more than welcome to make it that way if you'd like. I think it works fine. I think it works great. So that was the ink tank bag. Sorry for all the wordiness, but the bag can be a little bit confusing put together. Also because it's not fabrication, it's sewing, and sewing can be a little bit more complicated than glue this piece to that piece. If you have any questions, of course, put them in the chat or send them to me on social media or Etsy or whatever, and I will help you out. Let's move on. 2 more things to show you for this year's patterns. Remember, you can always just skip along the bottom with the chapters to figure out which thing you actually want to watch if you don't want to watch everything. So this is called a Fizzy bomb from Splatoon. There's nothing real about this. This is made of foam for the automated analyzers or whatever. Anyway, this is called a Fizzy bomb sub from Splatoon 2. I think in my pattern, I'm probably going to call it something like Splatoon soda can prop or something like that, because their automated revision system sucks. Anyway, so how do we make this, right? Of course, like I said, in the pattern, I have instructions for how to put it together, but I'm just going to talk about it really quick. So the first thing that I do is I cut out the side panels of the actual can for that, right? I also trim the edges a little bit so that at an angle so that they merge a little bit better. With any kind of foam, it's going to wind up with like a hard flat edge when you cut it together, or when you cut it, and then when you try to glue it with contact cement to another piece, right, you have that hard flat edge, and so it doesn't always line up perfectly. So what I recommend doing is just trimming that edge so it's a little bit more of an acute angle, so that when you put the sides of the can together, right, they go together a little bit smoother. So first up, do that with contact cement. The next thing that we're going to do is make the lids of the soda can, so these top parts here. Again, cut that out of the pattern. Both, after you glue them together, should just be, you know, a circle, basically a disc, and then you glue the ring on top of it to give it that shape, that depth. That's very soda can, right? Very much looks like a can, a drink. So you make those, then you can also glue the pop tab lid on top if you want. Right now is a good time to do it. So after you finish that, you should basically have what looks like a bursting soda can, right? Go ahead, and if you haven't already, glue the lids down to the actual sides that we've now glued together, so you'll have that soda can. Perfect. You're on your way to making a perfect Fizzy bomb. So the next thing we want to do is we want to cut out the springs. I call them springs, the top spring and the bottom spring. We are going to use a method called heat forming or heat shaping in order to get this unique shape, right? If you just cut out a piece of foam, try to attach it, it'll just be bendy. It'll just be like a little loop. Go like this because it doesn't have any defined shape yet. So using the pattern, look for the marks where I've indicated fold, right? You're gonna fold here, you're gonna fold here. What you do is take a heat gun, hopefully you have one, or a hair dryer might work. Take a heat gun, hair dryer, something like that. Heat up the strip where it says fold, right? Heat it up for a little bit, not too long, 10, 20 seconds, and then pinch it. Just pinch it in those areas. Pinch here, pinch there, pinch there. We're gonna do these one at a time so it's a little bit easier. And then you'll wind up, after you let it dry, it'll retain that shape. So it's being heat formed. So this will retain this very unique sort of spring shape for the top and bottom. Then you're ready to go ahead and attach those two. But hold off just a second. So really quick, measure where the middle of your can is, right? Measure from the end here to right here and say, yeah, that's about center, okay? So the first thing that we'll do is we'll attach the bottom spring. So using a little bit of contact cement, we're going to glue down the top of the spring here, right in the middle of the soda can. And then down here, we're just going to curve it around because this part wasn't heat formed. So it's gonna have a nice round shape when we curve it. So we're gonna glue it there, curve it around, and then glue it to the base of the can. Hold that in place for a little while, and eventually that'll dry, and that'll be good. You're good to move on. Sorry for this little black thing. This is how I'm attaching it to my cosplay for the day. So this is technically not part of the pattern. It's just on here like a little keychain. The next thing that we'll do is the top spring. So now that this is heat formed, go ahead and you can attach it right behind the pop tab. So glue that one down. Hold off on gluing this piece really quick. What we're gonna do is take our plumber's tape, attach it midway point in the back, wrap it around towards the front, hold that in place, okay? Then you're not gonna glue this yet though. And then you're gonna put the dowel piece on there, or your little cylinder on there as well. Hold that in place so that you can kind of figure out where the top of this spring needs to tuck into. So then once you have that, you can go ahead and mark it just a little line, let go of the cylinder, let go of the plumber's tape, and glue down the top of the spring to the middle of your can so that everything lines up. You want it to look nice and lined up and finished and perfect. So then you should have top, bottom spring attached. The only thing you have left to do is the plumber's tape and the little cylinder here. I think it's like a pin mechanism or something. In the back, again, go ahead and put your plumber's tape midway, meeting up with the bottom spring, right? And then fold the little flap from the bottom spring over the top, glue it, hold that in place so everything's glued right there, held in place. And then we're going to glue it along the sides, but not at the very end. You don't want it to fully overlap because then it misses the aesthetic. You want it to have this little piece that pops up still. So glue it along the sides of the can, and then make it meet right here, glue there. Don't glue this last little piece. Go ahead and take your piece of cylinder and then glue that down right there in the middle so it should make contact between your tape and your top spring. After you've done that, the construction for your Fizzy pop soda can prop should be done. Now here's the really challenging part. Because of all these nooks and crannies, because of, getting in here underneath the spring and whatnot, this thing is not fun to paint. You know how I build it. I've explained how I built it. It's up to you if you want to paint and then glue some things together. But again, the only thing that I'll tell you is that gluing things that are painted layers, finished layers, whether you use a spray like Plastidip or wood glue, gluing those kinds of layers together is not guaranteed to hold. It is not a great idea if you want your cosplay to last a long time, which is why I glued everything together as foam, unfinished, then finished it with a spray, then painted it. It will take a while because, like I said, there's so many nooks and crannies, all these little blue things in here, right? You have to get in there with a paintbrush, paint that 6 times, paint that 6 times, paint that 6 times. So how you want to do that is up to you. Maybe you have an airbrush, maybe you're a pro. Cool. The painting will probably not be enjoyable, but at least now you know how to put it together. So good luck. Send me any questions that you have. I'm happy to help you out. So the last thing that I want to talk about, I technically don't have a pattern for this. I can put the base head pattern up, but I don't have a pattern for this online. And this is my headpiece that I'm going to be wearing. This is my Splatoon hair that I'm going to be wearing for the convention. I want to talk to you about how you can make a base headpiece to get yourself started, because everything starts with the mold of your head, at least for me, right? So let's talk about that. I'm probably going to put some videos on the screen that show you start with saran wrap. Like a lot of things, if you don't know how to make a complex pattern, you start with saran wrap. I'm going to wrap it all around my head, right? So I get a nice wrapped cap. And the next thing I do after I'm happy with that shape is cover it with duct tape so that it maintains a permanent shape, essentially. Once I'm happy with that and the cap looks good, you can go ahead and take it off, draw some lines, and then cut the pattern essentially from that. Now, when I made this right here, I'll admit it's not perfect. There are some hard edges right here that if I was more knowledgeable about curves, I would have been able to eliminate, but I'm very happy with it. I think it looks pretty good. So I took my head cap off and then I cut it into 4 pieces. I've got my left side, my right side, and then the 2 main pieces down the middle. So after you've done that, you have these pieces. You trace them onto foam. I used 3mm because I wanted this layer right here, the hairline where it makes contact with your head, to be thin. There is a way to make it so that it almost looks like it blends into your skin, but if you can see, I just left it as a flat edge. I was fine with that and I liked it. So go ahead and trace your pieces onto your foam, cut them out, and then what I would recommend doing, once you have your pieces, this piece goes over here, is line up the pieces starting in the front. If you're new to making patterns, sometimes even when you have a perfect pattern and you cut them out, sometimes they may not line up. They may be slightly off or short, that sort of thing. This is gonna happen. That's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. But because the front of the head faces towards the action, faces towards spectators and whatnot, people that want to take photos, you want to make sure that at least that side looks the best it can be. So I recommend starting up here, right? We are going to glue these pieces using contact cement, of course, all the way back, and then in the end, if it doesn't line up in the back, that's okay. We'll worry about it later. But yeah, really easy. Basically, cut everything out, glue the side pieces first. It'll make sort of like a domey shape, and then glue your top strips all along until you get to the back, right? So you basically wind up with these 2 halves that'll look like this. And then once you're there, same thing, put glue, wait till tacky, put glue, wait till tacky, and then starting in the front, just sort of attach them and you'll wind up with a nice head shape like that. And I'm probably gonna show it on camera too, to show sort of what it looks like before I finished it and added the top piece. Advice for people adding tentacles and whatnot to the top of their head. This is tricky. I think mine came out pretty good. I went for one of the new styles from Splatoon 3. But this is very tricky. The best thing that I can probably recommend is to get modeling clay, foam modeling clay. You can make a structure basically and then add a lot of the foam modeling clay and it'll sort of round it out and give it a more natural appearance, which is what I heavily relied on. In order to make this one, I basically made three large rings. I made a huge ring here, basically glued down, a large ring here, glued down, a large ring here, glued down. And then the rest of it, I used a piece of spiraling foam. So I just glued it down and then started spiraling it down to about here, glued that down. And that was the skeleton. The skeleton looked pretty good. And then after that, I went through for a couple of days, about a week, or no, it was 2 weeks actually, and just stacked it on here, stacked it on here, stacked it on here to bridge the gaps between the skeleton and also give it a more rounded appearance. Now, is mine perfect? No, of course not, but it doesn't have to be, unless it does, and mine doesn't. So I think it still looks really good though, and that's basically how you get started making a head for Splatoon. I hope this video was informational for everybody, and if you choose to support me, and also I would add, make your life easier by purchasing my patterns on Etsy, you'd be an absolute pro and I would appreciate you. This was not a pattern that I designed, but all the patterns that I designed, this, the ink tank, the sword, all the patterns that we design, take a good amount of effort and accuracy to make sure that they come out looking good. So if you choose to support me, great. The link for patterns is below. I'd appreciate it. And of course, with any of my patterns, it comes with unlimited support. So if you have questions, you bother me on Etsy or social media or anything like that, even here on YouTube, and I can help you out. That is it for pattern tutorials for 2023. I will hopefully make a video next year when I come up with a whole bunch of new cosplay patterns. If there's something you want to see in particular, maybe it lines up with what I'm interested in next, go ahead and let me know in the comments and we'll just see what happens. Thank you for watching. To my normal crowd, or my usual crowd, I know this video isn't too interesting for you, but hey, if you watched it, then I guess thanks as well. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.